Marlboro, man. Crow's feet, you know what I'm saying? This is the Dakar Prototype update. Last time we had a update, it was week 2 of fabrication. It was demo deconstruction on getting the actual carcass car ready, and then it was getting our donor chassis ready. And you know, then the last update was really the floor and the planning. This is gonna be pulling us to week 10 and where the car is today. I don't really know where to start here. Obviously, we've been pressing on this every week consistently. I'm doing all the design direction. Colin is taking the reins with every bit of the fabrication. The only thing that I've really had a time-consuming hand in is getting all the final welding done. But this is a roller. It's, you know, it's a complete chassis. It's complete rear shock mounts, front side together, upper cage, seats in, dash in, center console in. We had this thing kind of prepped and assembled for Speed Metal, the TerraCrew event, and I wanted to bring it and display it. So we got it as good as we could, with as much stuff on it as we could, and now I made it a thing for Joey to come out here so we could film this update before we tear it back down, because it probably won't be on its wheels like this for a while. We're going to take all the suspension back off of it and really start diving into the next phase of work. But what you have here, I think last time we just had the floor in and we were talking about everything else. It's a lot to cover, but I mean, obviously we stuck to the plan with everything. So 2-inch cage rolled to the chassis. I think what we'll do is, I don't know when we're gonna have the body off either. I'd love for you guys to see it with the body off. But 2-inch cage all rolled to the chassis, 095 on the mains, and then 065 on all the stringers. Everything flows with the roof and the contours. The seats are out of a McLaren 720S. They're carbon backed seats. They're a real perfect fit. We wanted to kind of stray away from just a typical like Sparco or fixed seat. This is adjustable. So it's just got your 2-way adjustment. And that's all built in. And then obviously the instrument panel and the center console, that's all stuff we're gonna retain. That's all gonna be, like if we play our cards right with the wiring, the Motex will power all the turbos and the engine, and then all the infotainment center and the push to start and all that. We should have all of the working Range Rover stuff on here. So like remote start on the key fob, all the climate control, the AC. If you look at the chassis, all the AC is still intact. All the chassis was designed around that to still have like a premium structure, but to have the stock blower, all the stock steering column is in here. That's all adjusted and, you know, adapted to like trophy truck class 1 rack servo. All the steering works. 24 inches of travel in the front, 21 inches in the rear. This is just about ride height too. So you can kind of expect this thing to sit right about here. maybe an 1.5 inches higher. But right now it's at 12 inches of up travel, front and rear for compression. I know we went over powertrain before, and you know, there's a lot back here. It was super important for us to be able to have a working hatch. The whole concept of this thing being an SUV and a Dakar concept is to have that working hatch where it's not just a flimsy shell, or there's not like some kind of cutouts or something. It just needs to look like a complete car. The engine is exactly where it's going to live. You can see this strap here. This whole cradle is pretty dynamic, but that cradle is specific for a 37-inch spare. So the spare goes just above the engine. It's not enough to heat the tire up or do any weird stuff. You know, this is just the intake, so we'll be okay. And something to consider for the next bout of work is going to be the turbos. They're going to be twin 68mm turbos. You know, one living in this vicinity here, the other living on the adjacent side. We'll do all the turbo piping, all the wastegate, all that shit, and it'll come out in the D-pillar. So there's kind of a rough sketch here, just like I did that on the fly, but that's the concept. Is you'll have all this stuff exiting here. It'll probably shoot flames out this way, but it gets rid of it. The other good part about this is, yeah, it'll be loud, but it won't be loud in the cabin area. It'll be loud out back, and it's a lot easier to deal with noise like that than having this thing in the front and then running all through the car. How does this thing come out? Tube connectors. There's a plethora of tube connectors throughout the car, really just for this area and for all the fuel cell. There's a fuel cell under there that we already built. We'll talk about that in a second, but really process with this thing. Everything's been scanned. We scanned everywhere where the alternator, the factory alternator is. We scanned where we're gonna need to put our power steering pump, and then we scanned the entire gearbox and the engine in general is scanned, but what we're doing is we're developing a mid plate and a bell housing all in one that incorporates the starter as well. So it can adapt what we have there on the Albans to go to a big GM style clutch and flywheel. And then it'll also incorporate the starter, and it'll also incorporate the mid plate, so we can have this thing fixed in here. Right now it's just got mock-up stuff. Same with this. This is all just mock-up to roll it around and keep it in place. Nothing's going to change. And then the same with the alternator. We want to run a bigger alternator, not just the factory one, something like a DC power. That'll live in the same spot. The belt system is very minimal on this, and there's a very trick situation that has to happen with the power steering. The big billet PSS power steering pump has to live in the front, and it has to be off of another belt system. You know, it's a Lamborghini engine. There's just different stuff, and there's different challenges that require different solutions. So really, this is in here to work around and package around, and that's what we're going to do next. We'll package in the turbos, and then we'll really have to start figuring out coolers. That's kind of our next thing. I think before I talk about any more forward stuff, let's talk about, I wonder if I should grab the DJI and look under this thing. There's a lot to cover here. That's what sucks about not having updates consistently, is especially with this car, the progress is going so fast. It's hard to catch up. I think really you can look at our chassis. So that's what we originally had, right? That's our bulkhead that got sandblasted. Don't mind the mock-up. And then you can see what happened here is there's a pretty heavy transition of tube to plate. So this thing had some ugly stuff going on here where it was very similar to that rectangular shape, and it just kind of, went through here, and then it had like a tube stuffed into it, and it was all MIG welded around. So really what we wanted to do is find a transitionary spot here where we knew the CV was going to clear, and then we could start transitioning and have a really good approach angle on all this back tube work, and that's what we've did. So we've saved some of the strength with the cross member in here, and then we've got this approach angle here. This stuff will all get skid plates and, you know, ventilation plates on the side. But you can see here, that's that cross member we got in there. On this thing, welding wise, I want to say 50 hours of solid cover pass welding. You know, and then to match up with that, I think Colin was probably welding on this thing for several days. He'd kind of build and root pass as he was going, especially because with all of like our tube junctions, you know, like these guys, everything, like the primary tube is welded first, and then we stack the next one, weld all that, stack the next one. So it's not just a junction that's built and then welded around. You can see the rear bumper has a very heavy compound radius to it. Trying to figure out where the light's good. And this is built to fit our drawings and our digital model. So, you know, the valence on the digital model actually comes out quite a bit, 1.5 inches. So really this valence piece is going to land on the top tube. But you can see there's 3 radiuses in here. There's your middle radius, and then there's another tighter kick, and then there's a much more mellow draw off. And we just left that kind of long and untreated, the cap and all that. Once all the body is on here, and this thing, you know, has all its hips drawn out, then we'll be able to figure out what we really want to do with the bumper. You can see all the welding. You can see quite a system for the spare tire. This is a kind of a suspended tray for the bottom, and then there's kind of a upper perimeter stop, and then this Heim linkage here, or the rod end linkage. Those are just stainless turnbuckles, and that kind of gives us our pickup point for our strap. And the tire's pretty easy to get in and out. It's really just loosen the strap. The strap has to be off to one side to clear the hatch, because once the tire's in here, you know, it's probably covering half of the intake, and it's pretty close to the window. So that strap can't even have any excess here. So I don't know if you can see the radius and the rolls, but this entire thing up here is all one nice contour, and then the same with the middle. So it's kind of our signature thing to put aero tube for the intrusion bars. This car is so narrow, and the way the chassis layout is, we only need one. You can see how thin it gets. It's really nice because it doesn't obstruct any of your vision either. Radius gussets, kind of our typical program here. I like to treat these radius gussets where they're not just a perfect even, you know, like 45, but it's really putting more mass and strength into the support, the upright support, and then just putting a pedestal out to handle the support here, where there's a lot more shear strength in this than there would be just doing a 45. You can see there's another one living right here. Harness bar mounts. Just a lot of chassis in here. So harness bar mounts are the same program. Just these guys, we didn't want to take up too much real estate, so they really kind of draw right into the seat profile. and they're removable. A lot of the stuff in here, like doing harness bar mounts like this, makes sense to make it removable. So then when we do all the sheet metal, we're not having to work around this stuff. And also when we get the fuel cell out, the fuel cell needs a lot of space to finagle itself out of here. Figure out how to actually view the fuel cell. Probably best under here. So you can see that middle portion, all the aluminum there, that's all fuel cell. And then it tees off and it goes under the seats. See that same concept through here. And then right under the seat. Check out the McLaren seats. The styling matches the car really well. And these are just a really well-made seat. Completely adjustable. Well, not completely, but at least two-way. So recline and forward and reverse, or forward and rearward. Removable seat mounts. All that stuff unbolts, and you can see the tube connectors here. That's the same program, so you know it's thought out to the point where you can undo these guys, and then you undo the seat ones, because there's like a middle structure here, and we'll probably see this once we strip some of this down, and we'll go back to it like on a later episode. But you can see this whole structure is removable, and then the outriggers under the seats, these are all removable. And then that whole fuel cell under there just comes out through the door. So we were waiting on our bypasses from King. Brett's the one that's helping us out. Brett owns King. He's came up here and hand delivered those shocks for us. He loves this thing and supports us with it. So he'll probably be in a future episode. One of the things to look at too is the skid plate. I'm just trying to get some good functional design wins on this stuff to clear those bolts. If you were just to run straight tubes, you'd have more interference getting the bolts out, and this just adds dimension, and it protects the rack, protects the rod ends and just the rack from any debris. A little bit of sheet metal in here just to get our firewall uniball in. That had to kind of be there to position stuff, and then we'll just continue on some of the sheet metal process. So things to expect in here. This was our airbag deployment steering wheel. So this thing's like, just, you know, it looks like a blown out duffel bag. And when we took it to speed metal, you know, I asked Colin, what do we do? Do we want to tape that thing up? And he's like, you should put like a, you know, some kind of model or rendering in there just to have a proof of concept for anybody that wants to sit in it, because that was kind of the name of the game. Was I wanted to have this thing fully open and just have people be able to touch it and sit in it and experience it in this stage. And whenever we take it anywhere else, we'll do the same thing. I don't want to have it, you know, blocked off or closed off. I want people to be able to like go in here and feel this thing and experience the vision. Because when it's running and driving, the things it's going to do, it'll be really nice to think back like, man, I sat in that thing, what that must feel like while you're able to watch what it's doing. There's a selector knob here that kind of pops up. That's like your typical park reverse neutral drive thing. So this whole square here, we'll delete that, and that's going to be where there's a gated shifter, very similar to like a Lamborghini, kind of a nicely machined click gated shifter for the H pattern gearbox. This will be a 3-pedal car. It will have a clutch. It's an Albin Synchromesh H pattern. It should be an amazing driving experience. Let's talk about the shock mounts really quick. With the proportions and the packaging on the car, we knew that it wasn't going to be able to have 3 seats. It's a rear engine, it's not a front engine. There's a lot of packaging that goes on, and once you put those shocks right in the perfect spot where they need to be, then you get into a bind where you're definitely not going to be able to put a seat there. But I knew that back door should still be a functional thing, and that's what we have here. Is it worked out perfectly. Obviously the door handle's intact right now, but again, you know, talking before, when we get all of our body done, you know, like the doors and the rear quarters, this door handle will just get a relocation, you know, maybe 7 or 8 inches out. But you know, this is full compression marking. And we knew that like the door should still be functional. So when you open this thing, it's a extreme focal point for the shock packaging. All of the flow, you know, we wanted to have this kind of organic flow here. And we've definitely kind of hit the mark on that thing. These things are very potent. They'll be visual forever on the car. They're not going to get buried. There'll definitely be sheet metal behind here and some enclosure sheet metal with some windows and stuff, but really this is an amazing thing for serviceability because we can just simply open the door and boom, done. You can adjust all the bypasses, you can adjust nitrogen, you can do whatever you need to do. It might be a really good opportunity to use the door interior here as a storage. The window for the rear won't roll down just for obvious reasons. When this thing goes down, it's not going to clear the wheel opening. But this might be a great cavity to build out for storage, and you open that thing up and you can have all kinds of good stuff, or recovery stuff, first aid, whatever you need in here. This whole rear portion, so obviously like the chassis design was thought out to the point of not just having a typical B-pillar back wall where it closes out the seats, because especially when you go to seal the car in, it's like it makes it almost claustrophobic or very limited, like the spatial feeling. So the whole appointment back here with tube work is to have all of this be paneled in, and this will be an extension of the interior and the sealed cabin portion. So we'll be able to put soft goods back here or whatever else we need. The AC vents back here on the center console, those guys will still blow, and it should be great. Like the AC should be more than enough for this because it's used to blowing the full capacity of the SUV, and we're just running it a little past the front seats. So we should be in a good spot. The opening here, just like the model, this will be a really large scoop. You know, bedsides covering the tires, and then this whole portion here will be a scoop that'll feed cooling to the turbos and whatever, you know, and also the exhaust. I think one of the big things that's going to happen here is there's going to be a lot of scoop coming in, and it's going to be a matter of finding extraction and ventilation on all the stuff coming out, because just as important as it is to have it come into the car, it's important to have it flow back out. So we'll have to pepper this thing all through the under chassis here, you know, and also through like all this stuff. When it gets paneled in, will all need to be ventilation. One thing to note is this front moonroof will work. It'll be functional, it'll be clear and just glass in there. And then this one that we removed in the back, we'll trim a lot of the fat off this, and this will be all tin work. This will have a kind of a waterfall effect, and it'll just be an open ducting where we'll pull air in from here, and it won't be something where there's a positive shape like a scoop. It'll just be ducting going down. I think what we'll do is on top of the spare tire carrier here, we'll plant our intercooler right there. So something to think about with coolers. Cooling a 10-cylinder, 2,000 horsepower, twin turbo Lamborghini is going to require more than the normal. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to run 2 front radiators here that'll work in line, and then we're going to run a 3rd radiator in the rear. There will be a inline pump for the water to help the water pump at the engine, There'll probably be a total of 6 fans and 3 radiators just on the water lines themselves. Obviously we'll do the trans and the oil and the power steering. With Brett mentioned running a finned reservoir for the power steering cooler, so we'll probably run 2 finned reservoirs in the front just for power steering. They'll be very similar to these guys. And same as we did on the exotic, we're gonna wanna kick these coolers a little bit. So from center, we'll just put a little bit of hit of angle into these things, you know, and then obviously there'll be 2 coolers, so they'll be symmetrical here. Something else to expect on this next update is going to be the headlight and grille package. We had this thing modeled where just to package the 37, it needed to be 4 inches. The whole headlight and grille needed to be 4 inches forward, because the headlight has a little tail piece on the corner that kind of drags towards the rear, and at full compression and lock, we want to be able to clear all that stuff. So we'll have to get that headlight and grille in there just to figure out the cooler package. Igor's going to help us out from Triton Race Coolers. He's going to get our whole package going for this thing, so it'll be all custom spec for the car. It should be really exciting to see that. Something else to cover with the shock mounts. I'm sure you're wondering about construction on this stuff, or some of you are. This is 1/8 inch 4130 chromoly. You can see the thickness in here. This is all formed by hand. There's 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece, 4 piece, 5 piece, 6 piece in here. This came out a lot more efficient than I thought. We're probably about 100 hours into the rear shock mounts. The whole chassis is so square. We built it on the chassis table. It's so square that it was really easy to take the template from one side and transfer it to the other. There was no adjustments needed. Colin killed it. We kind of decided what we wanted to have welded and what we wanted to have blended in. So that's what it is. It's a hybrid of that. Now, you've seen this before with us. This is a structural sculpted piece. This is 1/2 inch tube, 1 inch tube, 90 plate, and then it's all built on tangent. It's welded and sanded, so it's extremely strong. And it looks like it's one molded piece, and it kind of mimics the streamline or the teardrop tubing of what you'd run with aircraft tubing, like the streamline tubing we have for the intrusion bar with a major axis and a minor axis. So you can see they hit pretty well, and I know it's hard to find symmetry between both sides with all the other tube work going on, but they're exact. They're beautiful focal points. When the shock compresses, it moves through here, it clears everything, so it's just, we got a pretty good win with the flow of that stuff. And just when you look at the car itself, it's got a lot of tension and beautiful shape, and especially when you start looking at the digital model of this thing, you know, it's very beautiful with all the shape, so it just ties itself in. It's the same with all the chassis and all the spare mounts. Everything kind of has an organic flow to it. Yes, the door handles will go back in when it's running and driving, and then you'll press something and they'll pop out. Okay, so I know that was a very compressed version of all the weeks of work. Like I said, we're on a path with this thing. We've really got into a groove with the efficiency on building this. It's the right amount of planning and logistics and the right client. And getting this thing moving at this pace. It's one of those things to think about too. Like I always say, the first 80% takes 20% of the time, and the last 20% takes 80% of the time. That's no different with this. Yes, of course, it went from tubes and bulkheads to a roller, but this is really where the clock starts to seem like it's slowing down, and it's not so much that our progress is getting any less. It's just that the smaller stuff takes more time. Putting big tubes in and tying stuff in and doing cage work like that, it's fast, it's easy, compared to all the minute details that we have to do now. And that's where we're gonna go. So really, I think our aim, just to kind of get you guys on the right track of what we're gonna do next, is we're gonna want to, like I said, we're gonna fix, I'm gonna talk with Peter, we're gonna get squared away exactly on where our headlights need to be, because I don't know if we adjusted the actual height a little bit of the headlights too. We're gonna get our headlights and grill in here, probably mock up. I don't think we wanna build anything fixed yet, unless we wanna just build some kind of support system out here, run the grill and the headlights, and then get orders going. Go through the car, figure out where we want coolers, intercooler, radiators, accessory coolers, get all that stuff ordered, and then that can be, you know, start to get made. And then we'll work into the back. We need to get all the turbo stuff going. So, you know, that's kind of a big undertaking, but really making this a complete unit, getting, you know, the air boxes in here, getting the wastegates, the blow-off valves, all this stuff in the right spot, and then tying everything together. We're gonna build our own turbo headers, billet flanges for the V10. We need to source those or make those. So there's a lot of stuff here. We're also looking at a billet intake. As much as I love this like crinkle Lamborghini, this is like the most, you know, known thing when you look at a Lamborghini engine. We do need to run a billet intake, something that can run the same size constraints but do a DI delete, and also that's just something that can fail. It's plastic and it's a composite, and we don't want that to be failing. So we'll run a billet intake in here, and just get this stuff squared away. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, I have Joe, and Joe is designing all our machine parts, because we will have billet trailing arms, billet lower arms, billet upper arms, billet uprights. I love those uprights. I wish we could keep them, but we do need to adapt to the JMAR stuff, because we did upgrade all the hubs on here. So the Pro-Am stuff, we're gonna go outboards on this thing. It does have a micro stub right now. It'll be an outboard, and then it'll be a 2.5-inch snout on the front, with a big trophy truck hub, and then trophy truck 6-piston calipers with trophy truck rotors, big 14-inch rotors on all 4 corners. So JMAR is working with us on this. We're gonna swap all this old stuff out, put all fresh stuff on, put that on with all billet trailing arms, hybrid stuff in the back. So it'll be like 70-75 aluminum with chromoly pivot, like through bolted indexed areas. The front, we're trying to configure a slapper arm, so we'll incorporate that into there. Same, just machine parts up the front. So it's a lot. There's a lot of irons and different fires here, but at least for us, the fabrication thing, we can just keep that train going while we have other stuff being done, and that's just the most efficient way to do it. So like I said, I think checking back the next time we get this thing, it's not going to be outside, it's not going to look like this, it's going to look like a car that's not as finished, because we'll have it all disassembled. But I think you can count on definitely having the turbos going, and if, you know, if we're still waiting on coolers, then what we'll do is we'll start to get all the cabin sheet metal. The way the sheet metal is going to work in this car, all the cabin, so from like A pillar to B pillar, and then back to that middle portion I talked about, like the cavity in there, that'll all be your very typical silicone bronze, bead rolled, cold roll steel. Once we get into these big voids here, these big triangles, the whole rear of this car will be all quarter turn style Zeus button, removable fasteners, all badass, all indexed. But this whole thing, the joy with doing something like that is all the sealed cabin area can, you know, it's not the same serviceable situation that you want for like the powertrain and the gearbox. So all the cabin area can be sealed and zipped up, and then this whole rear portion, since it's going to be all quarter turns, we can just take all of it off, and the whole thing will just be this wide open, where we can just go in there and work on it no problem, and it'll be great for maintenance. I love to keep this here right now just to show the concept, but really we're probably going to end up trimming this thing right to the body line here. and maybe surround some of this, and then we're gonna want to sheet metal in. So it'll all be one big enclosed area. I think that's it for this thing. I can't stress enough the vision with this thing. Like I said, when the Dakar first came out, I think it was in 13 or 14, or not the Dakar, the Velar. I looked at it and I go, what an amazing pre-runner that would be. I've always had a thing for SUVs, and you know, to get it to where it's at, this is the best version of this we could have done. It's nothing like what we initially thought, putting a front engine in this thing and just doing a very generic style thing with like a trailing arm and 3 seats. Just, this is the most extreme hyper performance situation we could possibly put together. So I have great expectations for this thing, and being able to build it out to this level with this kind of budget is incredible, and it's a gift, and this is going to be one of our best ones yet, and we have a couple more lined up that that'll kind of follow this. But it's been incredible, and my gratitude for something like this just never goes away. It's a blessing. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for supporting.